Imagine walking into the greatest city on Earth, only to find that 9 out of every 10 people have simply vanished. You are standing in the center of the world, and no one is there. Welcome to Rome, 500 AD. If you want to uncover the dark, lost secrets of history that schools never taught you, make sure to hit that subscribe button right now. To truly understand the streets of Rome in the year 500 AD, you must immediately erase the apocalyptic wasteland you might be picturing from popular Hollywood movies. Replace it with something far more haunting, far more psychologically terrifying, a monumental ghost town. A city that is slowly, stubbornly coming back to life under the rule of an alien king, the Ostrogoth, Theodoric the Great. This is 24 years after the traditional, catastrophic fall of the Western Roman Empire in 476 AD. Stepping through the imposing, heavily fortified gates of the massive Aurelian walls would completely overwhelm your senses, not with noise, but with sheer, staggering emptiness. At its imperial peak, Rome was a suffocating, deafening metropolis of over 1 million people. It was the New York City of the ancient world. But by the dawn of the 6th century, after decades of plagues, sieges, and political collapse, the population had plummeted to roughly 100,000. As you walk down the legendary Via Sacra, the first thing you notice is the sound, or rather, the stark, chilling lack of it, the constant, thundering roar of 1 million shouting merchants, the clattering of iron-rimmed wagon wheels, and the rhythmic marching of imperial legions has been replaced by the quiet, lonely echo of your own footsteps bouncing off colossal marble facades. The city is wearing clothes several sizes too big. The massive paving stones of basalt are still perfectly engineered and intact, but nature is beginning to stage a silent rebellion. Wild grasses and thick weeds stubbornly push through the cracks in areas where daily foot traffic has completely died off. If you wander toward the edges of the city, near the perimeter walls, it feels like the wild countryside has actively invaded. Entire neighborhoods that once housed thousands of working-class plebeians have been abandoned. Roofs have caved in. Wild vines swallow the brickwork, and sheep graze lazily where crowded multi-story urban apartment blocks, the insulae, once stood. You are looking at a dead city. But as you move closer to the absolute heart of Rome, you realize something impossible. The city isn't dead. It has been taken over. And the new masters ruling these empty streets are unlike anything the ancient Romans could have ever imagined. The atmosphere dramatically shifts from abandonment to an eerie, functioning resilience. The Ostrogoths, the so-called barbarians who conquered Italy, did not want to destroy Rome. They wanted to inherit its legendary prestige. Because of this, the streets in the monumental center are remarkably clean. Heavy wooden scaffolding clings to the sides of ancient temples and civic basilicas. Theodoric the Great is actively funding massive public works projects to restore the decaying monuments. The people walking these streets represent a bizarre, fascinating collision of 2 entirely different worlds. Walking past the ancient Senate House, you would see elite, old money Roman senators. They cling desperately to their heritage, strutting proudly in their bright white imported silk togas, pretending the empire never actually fell. But walking right alongside them are the new masters of Italy, towering Ostrogothic soldiers and administrators. They wear heavy wool trousers, thick furs, and belts adorned with garnet inlaid gold. They carry broadswords and look upon the marble wonders around them with a mix of genuine awe and conqueror's pride. If you stood in the Roman Forum as the morning sun hit the temples, you would witness a profound, deliberate cultural segregation. King Theodoric believed heavily in a political concept called civilitas. He actively wanted Romans and Ostrogoths to live peacefully side by side, but to remain completely separate entities. The Goths were the exclusive military muscle. They carried the weapons, manned the Aurelian walls, and held the fortified garrisons. They were Arian Christians, speaking their own Germanic language, purposefully sticking to their own neighborhoods. To the native Romans, these men in trousers were once mocked as unwashed savages. But now the Romans are slowly starting to adopt those very same woolen trousers for practical warmth during the bitter winter months. The cultural lines are blurring, no matter how hard the elite try to stop it. Yet, living side by side with heavily armed giants wasn't the biggest daily challenge for the average Roman. The real battle was simply figuring out how to survive the next 24 hours without starving to death. For the average working-class Roman plebeian, the day started before sunrise and was strictly defined by brutal labor. Without the massive, empire-wide grain fleets from Egypt that once fed hundreds of thousands for free, survival required genuine hustle. The city was organized into tight-knit trade guilds. Bakers covered in fine flour worked communal brick ovens. Blacksmiths hammered iron agricultural tools, and tanners worked pungent leather near the muddy banks of the Tiber River. To truly taste the reality of Rome in 500 AD, you have to imagine a dinner table where the ancient Mediterranean diet collides directly with the hearty, meat-heavy appetite of the Germanic North. Despite the political collapse, King Theodoric actually went to great lengths to maintain the annona, the famous state-sponsored food dole. If you were an eligible Roman citizen, you still received regular rations of baked bread, salted pork, and cheap wine. It was a brilliant political move specifically designed to keep the remaining population fed and completely docile. Walking past the bustling street-level taverns known as popinae, the air would be thick with the pungent, unmistakable smell of garum. This fermented fish sauce was the absolute lifeblood of Roman cooking. Splashed over boiled lentils, bitter greens, or roasted meats, it was a powerful, salty flavor enhancer. The poorer citizens, living in crowded apartments without indoor kitchens, relied heavily on these smoky street vendors for their daily calories. They grabbed quick, cheap meals of dense barley porridge, heavily garlicky cabbage, or thick chickpea stew, washing it down with water mixed with harsh, sour wine. Cross the cultural divide into the heavily guarded Ostrogothic neighborhoods, and the culinary aroma changes entirely. The Goths brought the dietary habits of the colder northern forests. They preferred rich, heavy butter and animal fats over olive oil. They feasted on large portions of roasted beef and mutton, drinking thick, cloudy ales brewed from fermented grains. Meanwhile, on the Palatine Hill, the ultra-wealthy Roman senatorial elite engaged in a desperate, lavish performance. They reclined on cushioned wooden couches, served by private cooks who prepared whole roasted boars stuffed with spiced sausages and delicate dormice rolled in expensive honey and poppy seeds. They spiced their imported wines with black pepper and fragrant flower petals. But it was an illusion. The massive, globe-spanning maritime trade networks had fractured. The ingredients were vastly more regional now. They were kings of a shrinking island. It sounds like a city reduced to bare survival and hollow echoes. But the Romans of 500 AD still had one spectacular, colossal luxury that defied all logic. A marvel of engineering that was still consuming millions of gallons of water every single day. By the early afternoon, the grueling physical work generally stopped, and the city transitioned seamlessly into its traditional leisure time. This brings us to one of the most surprising and magnificent facts about Rome in 500 AD. The famous Roman baths were still fully operational. Theodoric went out of his way to ensure the massive aqueducts, damaged in previous sieges, were repaired and heavily maintained. This meant you could still walk into the colossal, vaulted spaces of the baths of Caracalla. Imagine stepping out of the noisy, dusty streets and into these towering marble halls. The intricate, colorful mosaics were still largely intact on the floors. The high vaulted ceilings still echoed with the loud laughter of the crowds. Romans still moved methodically through the heated rooms, the tepidarium and caldarium, before plunging into the freezing waters of the frigidarium. They scraped the daily dirt from their skin with cheap olive oil and a curved metal strigil. It was here, submerged in the warm water, that the ghost of the old empire felt most vibrantly alive. People gambled with bone dice, gossiped about local scandals, and loudly discussed the politics of the day. The baths were the great equalizer, a place where the crushing reality of their fallen empire could be temporarily washed away. But sitting in warm water wasn't enough to satisfy the Roman soul. They craved something darker, something faster. And just a few blocks away, an ancient arena was about to erupt into absolute bloodthirsty madness. When they weren't lounging at the baths, their obsession with mass public entertainment remained entirely unchanged. While the bloody, fatal gladiatorial combat of the Colosseum had been heavily outlawed decades earlier, the massive arena still hosted theatrical, highly dangerous animal hunts. But the true, undisputed heart of daily excitement, the absolute climax of Roman life in 500 AD, was the Circus Maximus. The massive chariot racing factions, specifically the dominant blues and the greens, commanded an almost religious, dangerous fanaticism. On race days, tens of thousands of citizens, both native Roman and Ostrogoth alike, would pack the massive stone stands. The cultural segregation temporarily vanished, replaced by tribal loyalty to a racing color. They screamed themselves absolutely hoarse as four-horse chariots drifted violently around the treacherous turning posts at breakneck speeds. Crashes were frequent, spectacular, and deadly. For those few chaotic hours in the afternoon, surrounded by the deafening roar of the cheering crowd and the sharp, metallic smell of kicked-up dust and horse sweat, the citizens didn't feel like survivors lingering in a fallen city. They felt exactly like the masters of the world. They were living out the intense, violent daily passions their ancestors had enjoyed for centuries. They were Romans. In every bite of coarse bread, dipped in local olive oil, in every cheer echoing through the Circus Maximus, and every sip of spiced wine. The people of 500 AD were consuming the physical remnants of a fractured empire. They were sustaining themselves in a twilight city that was slowly, inevitably, transforming into something entirely new. A medieval future was dawning, built directly on top of the majestic ruins of antiquity. Long may it endure. What surprised you the most about daily life in the remnants of Rome? Was it the functioning baths or the barbarian kings fixing Roman temples? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this journey into the dark corners of history, hit like, subscribe, and ring that bell so you never miss an episode. See you in the past.